Hey everybody, I'm out here on this beautiful fall afternoon in Peewee Valley, Kentucky, and I have come across something rather interesting. I've been here a few times, but I've never brought you guys out here, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little video today on something that's one of a kind in the state of Kentucky, where I live. It is the one and only Confederate Cemetery in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky was divided during the Civil War. It was technically a neutral state, but a good portion of the state went with the Confederate side, and a good portion of the state went with the Union side. But when the war was over, there was still a strong connection to and sentiment for the Confederate cause. You can't judge it by today's lens, right or wrong. It was just the way things were at the time. And in the early 1900s, there was a need for some care for Confederate veterans. Older people, it's like nursing home type care was needed. And the state of Kentucky put together a home in Peewee Valley, Kentucky for Confederate veterans to live out their end of days. And this cemetery is located about 1 mile from where that home used to be. The building for that is no longer around. It burned to the ground. And so all that's left is really this cemetery. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of that. So we're out here at the Confederate Cemetery, 1902 to 1934. When I was filming earlier, I was over here by this little box. When you come out here, it's in a larger cemetery. You might be able to see the field over there. There's another cemetery that this is adjacent to. There's also one across the street. There's a street behind that fence that is traditionally a black cemetery here in Peewee Valley, Kentucky, and it remains as such today. So when you come in the parking lot, you can find a directory here. There's a listing of the graves, like a chart type listing, and people sign a guest book here. I looked through them a little earlier. It goes back to about 2018. As I'm filming this, it's 2023. It's October. It's actually Halloween. Anyway, a little bit about this place. We're going to walk through it here. The Kentucky Confederate Veterans Home existed in Peewee Valley, Kentucky, as I said earlier, and it was a facility for aging Confederate veterans of the war. This is the only Confederate cemetery in the state of Kentucky that is officially recognized by the state. There are some other areas where Confederates are buried in large groups together, but this is the only official Confederate cemetery in the state of Kentucky. There are 313 people buried here. 312 of them are former Confederate soldiers, and one of them is a man who worked at the Confederate home, and he requested upon his death that he be buried amongst the men that he helped care for while they were still living. And I'll walk you by his grave in a minute. There is always a Confederate, not a Confederate battle flag. If people know their history, there is a Confederate flag up there. It's flying above us on this flagpole, and flag of the state of Kentucky. There are a couple of monuments here. This place has been fairly well maintained. They don't get a lot of vandalism, they get some. There's a plaque. Let's see what it says here. It says, in this plot are buried 313 Confederate soldiers who were residents of the Kentucky Confederate Home. This home was purchased by the Southern people of the state, furnished by the Kentucky Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and turned over to the state in 1902. The Commonwealth of Kentucky maintained the home until 1934, until the Daughters of the Confederacy, the United Daughters of the Confederacy are the guardians of this hallowed spot. I don't really know anything about that organization. I don't know if they still exist. I understand that they do, as well as the Sons of the Confederacy, but I don't know much about the groups. Here's an interesting looking sign that is over the cemetery. It says the same thing basically as the other sign on the far end back there. Kentucky Confederate Cemetery, dedicated October 23rd, 1902 is what this says. There's an obelisk here, and this is was brought here, I believe it was in 1904. Based on my research, it was 1904, and it was provided by the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. It is one of 61 Confederate monuments in the state of Kentucky that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Let's check this out. Erected by Biscoe Hindman, June 1904, in memory of our Confederate dead. Now, I did a little research on this gentleman before I came out here and made this video. He funded this and was a member of the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. You know what's interesting about this is this monument, although it looks stone, is actually made of zinc. So they were very popular at the turn of the last century. Zinc monuments were. They look like stone, but they're a lot cheaper, and they were kind of a fad. But they hold up to the weather nicely, and they don't rust. So that's been here since 1904. And this, unfortunately, has been vandalized a few times over the years. People have come out and looked at this through the lens of today's world. I'm not advocating for any kind of cause. History is what it is. So take of that what you will. But anyway, that's that monument is the Confederate monument here. So, like I said earlier, there were 313 burials here. All of them have fairly similar headstones. Most of them are fairly simple rectangular stones. Some are just a bit different than others. I don't know, I would assume the state paid for these since the state ran the home. After the war, Confederates were brought into the fold of the United States military as far as it came to benefits. And, you know, a lot of these people here, looks like their stones are all exactly the same. So I'm going to assume that the state paid for these. Perhaps family members paid for some. There's not many that are different. There's one over here that's a little different than the rest. Let's go check this one out. And then I'm going to show you what a typical Confederate stone looks like that comes from the VA. Because yes, the VA still provides stones today, but they did back then too. This stone's a little different. Here is a typical Veterans Administration Confederate headstone. And what makes these different is you can see the Confederate crest at the top, but see how the top is angled instead of curved. If you go to a federal cemetery, a military cemetery, what you notice is other soldiers of that time, the top of their stone is curved, and these are angled just a bit. So you can find these in cemeteries very easily because they look like a typical military marker, but the top is angled like that. So there's a few of those here, but most of them are rectangular in shape like this one. So this is the Confederate Cemetery. I did mention that there was one person buried here who was not a Confederate soldier. You'll notice that all the Confederate soldiers have their company and the division they were in. This gentleman here is in Company A of the 1st Kentucky Cavalry, and it has his years of birth and death. Check this one out. It has a Confederate States of America headstone, and this is Thomas Hancock. Now, it just says a faithful nurse. He was not a soldier. He did not fight in the war. He just requested that when he died, that he be buried here amongst the men that he helped care for at the Confederate home. And so he was granted that wish, and here he lies. Occasionally when I come past here, I live not too far away, I will see flowers on some of these graves. I assume there are folks who do some genealogy research and come out and, you know, put something on a family member's grave. As time goes by and this gets further and further away, people tend to forget. You notice that in any cemetery, as time goes by, the older sections, there's just no flowers. Look across the road. Look at all the flowers in that cemetery. And over here, there's just none. This is an older cemetery. Even the adjoining cemetery over this way, a lot of it's older. It is still in use. People are still being buried here. Not in the Confederate cemetery portion, but on the other side of this road here, people are still being buried. You can still buy a plot there. There's one grave back here that has some kind of a decoration on it. And that's it in the whole cemetery. There's no other remembrances left out or anything. Someone did leave a coin on here. There's a few of them that have pennies left on them. If you want to know the significance of that, there's plenty of information online. Basically, it's saying I was just here. I passed by, and here's a little memento. This one is the only one in here that has some sort of a memento left on the grave. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the little tour. This is the Confederate Cemetery in Peewee Valley, Kentucky. I'm going to put a link below to a little bit of information on this place, and I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I hope you have a great day.